Welcome back to Run Amok with Rex and Chuck, and allow me to welcome myself back since I actually missed the last installment.
Nice.
This, of course, is Chuck. To my left is Rex, who I have missed dearly, and a man who I've perhaps missed even more, our producer, Nate, and of course,
I see how it is.
sitting down the hall from us in his private intern booth is Dutch.
Yeah,
who's working on getting me some water.
It's actually the bathroom. It's our guest bathroom, but I kind of turned it into a little area for him to work.
We are counting on him not knowing that. Some cultural differences there.
I think he'll know. I think he'll notice. It's a very small space with a toilet and a sink, but it's okay.
Yeah. Well, when his work proves that he can handle a more civilized space,
sure,
he'll get one.
Right.
Maybe he'll even make it to the desk someday.
Maybe.
In any case, I have been told that there's some interest in this thing called the Bible, right? So we've talked about it previously. I think we did a discussion on favorite, most meaningful books for us, right? Because most believers, they'll have like a life verse or a life book, a certain book of the text that they go back to and that they always find is useful and fruitful for them. But now there's been some interest in just knowing how we arrived at the modern Bible and why there's such a diversity of translations in modern Christianity. So, you know what, guys? I'm actually I'm gonna sit on the bench for a second and let you reason this one out.
No.
Okay. I'm interested to see how much
Nate.
foreknowledge there is.
Really, you're bunting right away.
Yeah, no.
I see.
How many translations, or not translations? That's not what we're talking about. How many different versions? So, like, there's the New International Version. There's the
that is a translation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean to say
when
not,
you think
not
of
language
translations.
Oh, I
yeah.
see.
So you're thinking of like German, English, Hebrew.
Right.
Stuff like that.
But why do we have so many in English?
Sure. Yeah, Nate, why do we have so many versions of the Bible?
What do you think?
On the spot.
Yeah, no. Well, I'll answer too, but I want to know what you think.
I've read mostly the NIV from personal experience. I guess that's what I just grew up on, New International Version. Chuck, you use English Standard Version a lot?
Our church, the church standard is English Standard ESV. A lot of my personal reading actually done out of the New Living Translation.
Oh, yeah, NLT, right.
Okay. And then probably the Bible I have used the most, just for my own personal
King
enrichment.
James.
No.
What?
Okay. It's a C.S. Lewis Bible. So basically what it is just the Bible, and then there's selections from his writings, that might be relevant to a certain verse, or perhaps they were even written about a certain verse.
Yeah.
And that's published in the New Revised Standard Version.
Another C.S. Lewis fan.
I feel like we're getting a hint in his answers as to why there are different versions.
Possibly. Well, the way I was told or taught, I think, is that they all have different things, different perspectives or values to bring to the table as far as like speaking to you personally in your style. So there's a reason that like Chuck enjoys that version, C.S. Lewis version. There's a reason that I gravitate towards the NIV. There's a reason that a person gravitates towards a certain translation. And like, I know there's one, I think it's called The Message, that's very like modernized.
Corey's into that one, right?
Oh, no.
No?
Yeah, absolutely not.
Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe she just hates The Message.
Well, I think people will criticize it because it gets too far from the original text because the point of it, I think the point of it is to like give you the gist of things and like sort of do a little bit of your hard thinking for you so that you don't have to like.
I've never actually read The Message, but in my mind it's always been to me like, what if you had like this 17, 18-year-old valley girl completely memorize the Bible and then give you her version.
There you go.
Like in my mind, that's how I've thought of it.
No
that could be completely off, but
no offense
not
to the people
far
who
from
created
the truth.
it. But
really,
okay.
It's just kind of really like,
it's funny.
I don't know, evened out of like, okay, this is how it would maybe sound to somebody who's very, very modern.
Yeah, like super,
or at least thinks
modern.
they are.
It's like the opposite of the King James version, I guess, in my mind. But anyway, that's why.
Since we're talking about it, why do people love the King James version? Is it just because of how long it's been around?
Old stuffy
I
people.
think it's partly that. there does seem to be this tradition. I find it mostly with like old school Southern Baptists. This tradition. So like somewhere in the history of that or some related denomination, this idea about the King James Version started getting spread around that is an anointed, special, holy, blessed translation of the Bible, and therefore that's the only one intended to be read in the church, intended by God to be read in the church.
That's extreme.
And I've met people who really, like, they'll go to the mat for that.
There is something special about how it hits you when you hear it being read in King James.
Maybe for some people,
but it just feels like there's so much weight to it, man.
Because it's an Old English.
Yeah. When I hear the Old English, a lot of times I'm just like, man, why go through the extra trouble for like no additional benefit?
That's
like, you don't speak this language. You might as well be trying to read it in Spanish.
Mm-hmm. I guess, yeah. All right, so
how about you, Rex?
How about me? Why do I think?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I nobody's ever actually told me. But I feel like I've kind of gleaned it from just being around all the different churches I've gone to and the different pastors and talking about why they like different ones for different studying, or like, okay, I really like this one when I'm just reading to myself, or I really like this one when I'm like trying to put together a sermon, or I really like this because it's, I can read it to my kids, like whatever the reason is. I think you're right in that there's just a flavor of personal preference. And then there's they do definitely, like, it's not like every word is different in them. There's a lot of similarities in them. Just select words are changed, and it could be because those words really do have multiple meanings in like the original language. And some people literally think, well, based on context, I think it's this meaning. And then other people are like, I disagree. I think it's this meaning. So they made a different version. And then it's kind of up to you to be like, well, I tend to agree more with this side versus this side. That's why I think that we have them. Why we have so many, though, not too sure.
Yeah, it does seem a little excessive.
Why we need to have as many as we have.
Right.
But at least for 2, 3, 4 different versions, I could see it being because of translations, because the original language was just so nuanced with meaning and context and like, it almost, when I think about it, I'm almost like, man, is English just like a dumb language?
Yeah.
Like, are we just not that smart?
English is also very nuanced.
How come we don't have 8 different ways to say love? Like,
well, we kind of do.
I guess maybe
we do. There's love. There's like.
Yeah, but then you just sound dumb. Like, imagine somebody else like.
There's
I like you.
There's adore.
There's sound like a caveman.
There are things. I mean,
adore.
English, I think it's because we have adverbs.
Right.
Well, yeah, okay.
So
that's why.
You can love in a brotherly way.
Yep.
You
there
can
you
love
go.
in an affectionate way. You can love in a romantic way.
But you gotta use this whole sentence when they just have this nice little word.
True.
Yeah.
Anyways, what do you think? What do you know?
Well, the short answer is it's a blend of history and mission and intention and purpose. And some of those words are synonyms, I realize, but historically, just at different points in the timeline, it's been appropriate for different translations to arise, right? So to understand that, you sort of have to know how we arrived at a Bible, because until the 4th century at the Council of Nicaea, you don't have a unified canon of the Bible. Christians generally agreed this is what the biblical texts are. These are the ones that we're going to read and teach in our congregations. But then you have these heretics rise up, and one of them actually forms a canonical list of biblical texts. And the actual Orthodox Church hasn't done that yet, so they form this council and they say, well, we can't have these heretics out there doing better work than we are.
Right.
So they form the biblical canon that we know today as the Old and New Testament. And that's actually why in Catholic churches, their Bible does look different. Mm-hmm. They include a series of texts that we know as the Apocrypha, which really are texts that the theology was so weird that the early church pointed out these texts and said, yeah, these don't line up with the stuff that Jesus taught, so that can't be part of the Bible. Some of them are just outright myths. There's Saint something or other and his dragon.
Awesome. Wait, why am I not Catholic?
Yeah.
That part seems worth it.
Some of them are what they call the pseudepigraphia. They are texts written under an assumed... That was fun. Written under an assumed name that we know wasn't actually written by that person. So one of the ones is called the Wisdom of Solomon, right? And it's supposed to be like another book of Proverbs, kind of.
Sure.
But we know Solomon didn't write it. Like, it's written centuries upon centuries after he
just somebody's
lived
like,
and died.
Listen, I got some wisdom. Let's slap Solomon's name on it.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not an uncommon thing in ancient writing, that someone would assume the name of like some ancient great person and write under their name. So that's the pseudepigraphia didn't make it in.
People. Like, oh yeah, Einstein? Well, I'm just like him.
Yeah.
You may as well take everything I say.
Yeah, it would be as if like someone wrote a novel, like wrote an autobiographical novel.
It wouldn't be plagiarism because it's not the actual wisdom of that person.
Oh.
You're just using their name.
Yeah, it's different.
It would be like if you wrote a fiction now, but you said that it was written like under Einstein's name.
Okay.
Right.
So you write some like autobiography about Albert Einstein going back to Germany and like killing zombie Hitler.
That's a movie, I think. I think that's a real thing.
I guess I wouldn't be surprised. We've done so much zombie stuff and kind of Nazi zombie stuff that maybe that exists. But if that movie's not out there, someone should get on that. Einstein was a lot cooler than people think he was, but he wasn't just some nerd.
Well,
I keep hitting the little spring.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's what that noise is.
Cool.
In any case,
we needed sound effects.
That's right.
Yeah. In any case, so it's like I said, it's a blend of history and purpose and intention, right? So you go back to the 4th century, the biblical canon gets established, but it's all still in Greek, right? And then at some point, it changes over into Latin, and then from Latin into German, and then finally, in the 1500s, we go from German into English, and that's where we have the authorized version, otherwise known as the King James Version. And for a long time, that's all we have in the English language. So that's what the Pilgrims bring over with them. Flash forward a couple centuries, the American Standard Version gets written. That becomes a very popular translation, right? So historically, it's become appropriate that new translations come up, especially as researchers and translators find more and more families of Greek manuscripts. So when the King James Version was written, the Greek manuscripts we had to translate from, the collection we had was quite limited, and the access that the English kingdom had was somewhat limited. But by the time, English Standard Version arises, we now have several families spanning across different centuries. We know which texts are more reliable, more like what the original teachings probably were. So we can choose some of those manuscripts over maybe some that the KJV went with. And yet, even with the English Standard Version, which is probably one of the top 3 popular translations in the U.S., there's still probably like 85 to 90% agreement with what the King James Version says. So the faithfulness of translation and preservation of the ancient texts is actually very astoundingly high.
Okay, that's respectable.
We know a lot. That's really the significance of the Dead Sea Scrolls in Christian life. Like, those were found, and that confirmed for so many that we really had been accurately translating these texts down across the generations.
That's good.
Because there's a complete version, for instance, of Isaiah, and it's like word for word accurate to what a modern English version of Isaiah would say.
Nice.
Same order and everything. So
last question. What kind of credentials do I need before I go out and put out my own version?
The Rex version.
Well,
the Rex translation.
It's funny you should ask that.
The NRV, the new Rex.
Yeah,
and
I like it.
And that kind of brings me to like the purpose and intentionality part of the answer. So you sort of have the historical answer now, just that at different times our knowledge of the ancient text has grown. It's become appropriate for new translations to arise. Also just changes in language. Like I said, you don't speak Old English. So why would you study the Bible in Old English?
You don't know that.
Yes, I do. But
I've been to a Renaissance fair.
Right.
I don't doubt that. But we can put on the act,
sure,
and change our thises to thines and stuff like that.
Yes.
But it's not a language that we live in, right?
Oh, it sounds so cool.
So that's like the historical answer. But the purpose and intentionality answer is there's sort of a spectrum of purpose for biblical text, right? The ESV lives actually at the far end of what you would call the functional side of the spectrum, where it is trying to stay very true to the original wording of the text, right? It is preserving word for word what the most ancient manuscripts say, and they don't really care if some parts are going to read awkwardly in modern English because this is what the ancient texts say, right? Then there's like the expressionist side, where as long as you can express the theme of what the ancient texts were trying to say and the idea that's there, you can use more modernized versions of the English. You can change words around. You can change sentence structure to make it read better.
So
that it's easier to understand.
That's where we get something like the Message.
So the Message lives at the far end of that side of the spectrum.
18-year-old Valley girls in California can understand the Bible now.
New Living, probably a little bit closer to like the expressionist side of the spectrum, but actually somewhere in the middle. And when I meet people who are fairly new believers and they say, well, what kind of Bible should I buy? I most often point them to NLT.
Oh, okay.
Because there's going to be a few verses, especially like in the Torah, that they're going to come across in the ESV that are just going to puzzle them. But in the NLT, they'll read those verses and they'll go, oh, wow, okay. This does read a little bit easier. However, the NLT does preserve the function of the original text a lot more than, say, the Message does.
Good.
Now,
nice balance.
The Message is really the work of one guy.
Oh.
So this is where we're going to get to
okay, so
your question.
I'm gonna pay attention because this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So the Message came about because this guy Eugene Peterson came along. And said, hey, there needs to be a translation of the text that modern audiences will just be able to access very easily. That expresses, for the most part, what those older translations are trying to say, but that makes it make more sense in a modern context. And he took it upon himself to write that translation without like an editorial board,
which just one guy.
Yeah, just one dude.
Awesome.
And most translations, by the way, have like a committee. So the NIV has a committee of all PhDs.
Who picks these people, though?
The committees?
Yeah, how do they get defined?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Probably like any
like
good committee. They go into the seminaries. They find people who have published papers about translation.
They do some research, and they're like,
so
okay,
for
these
instance,
are smart dudes.
at my seminary, 2 of the professors I studied under are on the committee for the NIV.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
So shouts out to Dr. Mark Strauss and Dr. Janine Brown.
Avid listeners.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
Yeah, they'll hear this. Official friends of the show. But they're both on the translation committee for the NIV.
Nice.
Okay.
And they're scholars in Greek. They both taught Greek at the seminary, and Dr. Strauss taught New Testament. She specialized in Matthew's gospel. He specialized in Luke. And because they published so many papers, committee forms to translate the NIV, they seek out people like this.
Awesome.
ESV has its own committee. I think theirs is more a blend. NIV is more like textual, historical scholars. ESV has enough of those, but there's also some like theology experts on that board. I think Wayne Grudem is on it. John MacArthur might be involved there.
Oh yeah,
but
I go way back with John MacArthur.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah.
But in any case, so like a translation can arise just from one person's mission and purpose. So Eugene Peterson said, we need a very understandable, accessible version of the text. He writes the Message.
All right, so give me
there's
like
a translation.
2 years.
There's a translation called the Passion Translation. I want to say that's the go-to version for Hillsong. It might have actually been written specifically for their purposes, but that's a similar story where it's like one person or one small team of people, not necessarily from the academic realm, who get together and say, hey, there's a way to translate this that would be more beneficial to our church or for our purposes, and so they just write it.
So it wasn't Mel Gibson.
No.
Okay, well, that's probably good.
We are running shorter on time, but and I don't know if there's a quick answer to this, but those kind of translations where it is literally one guy or one girl, whatever, person,
one entity.
Yeah. Are those trustworthy?
Well, it depends on how much you trust the author.
Seriously? Yeah. Like,
I trust more in a cloud of witnesses than in one. But the truth is, like, I used to have a much harder edge when it came to the message.
Right.
You know, like I used to tell people, avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
I still don't direct people to it.
Right.
I go with NLT.
Yeah.
For new believers especially. If you're doing something academic or, you really want to like study this in a scholarly way, I always direct people to ESV.
Sure.
NIV is good there too. ESV and NIV agree like 98% of the time.
Okay.
But when it comes to can you trust the message, it really depends on how much you trust Eugene Peterson.
Yeah.
Now, he was a great theologian. He was a pastor for like decades, had a fantastic ministry, and you can read it, and it's like if you know what's there in the ESV or NIV, you can recognize, okay, this is saying essentially the same thing, but there is something about the very modern English, kind of low English of it that still like offends my conscience somehow.
But you are a scholar, so that's kind of...
I guess, but like I try not to be a snob about it.
Sure.
So when I meet people
who
are very into the message, I don't go like, ugh.
No, I don't judge them for that.
I do.
You know, like you should throw that away.
Right.
Like, have you tried the NRV?
Yeah.
Let me introduce you to. If you can read that crap, read this.
There you go.
I was surprised to learn that really one of the patriarchs of our church, Graham Krause, who founded one of the two churches that became Rockridge in the timeline, was super into the message.
Interesting.
I can see that.
And he was like a more old school, studious, quiet kind of guy. So I would have thought like, oh, he's probably, KJV or bust probably. But then after he passed away, I was talking to a member of his family about it, and they said, oh, there's his Bible. And I was surprised to find it was a Message translation. And someone said, oh, cool. Yeah, he loved the Message.
I think he also had that contextual knowledge, like you were saying, how he's read the other stuff, the functional stuff, and he knows like it enough to be able to judge that thing by those standards. And that's interesting.
So 10 years as a worship leader, that's not enough, probably.
I mean, go for it if you're going to do it. Yeah. But I'd say have like a real objective.
I'm going to rewrite the... Yeah.
I mean, some translations some translations have a very specific objective. So like NRSV,
my objective is that my opinion is better than everyone else.
And to make money.
Well,
and people need... I wouldn't sell it. I'd give it away for free.
So like
lead people astray.
So it'll be one of the things where it's like, oh, you can access it for free, pay whatever you want.
Oh yeah. You pay what you think it's worth.
It's the humble bundle.
People are like,
the humble bundle.
Like NRSV had a very specific mission. They have their own committee, but they basically agree with ESV most of the time. But their main difference was we want to take all of the gendered language and make it gender neutral.
Oh, interesting.
Except
very modern,
except when they talk about God himself.
Sure.
So like God gets to keep
he gets to be
God does not get to be a woman.
In their translation, God gets to keep his male character.
Yeah.
But any time in the original text it might just say brothers,
sure.
For instance, in a lot of Paul's letters,
sure.
They add and sisters.
Right?
Sisters, or they'll change a he to a they.
They should just change it to y'all. Hey, y'all. Listen
the Texas Standard Version, thank you.
Yeah. That's actually, there actually is kind of a joke about that in like the world of Greek translation, because they have a second person plural way of translating different verbs,
which is y'all.
Exactly. But when you translate it into English, right? you basically write it as like you all.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to just write you, because that could be confused for being
Singular.
first person.
Right.
Or singular, right?
See, this is what I'm talking about.
Second
English
person
is like
singular.
a dumb language.
Yeah. So there's this joke that like for Greek students, okay, translate the second person plural into y'all or you all.
Yeah.
You know.
Y'all.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Y'all is easy.
So I hope you all learned something.
Right.
Yes.
Today.
Perfect.
Excellent.
I like it.
So yeah, that's kind of the long and short of it. If you've ever wondered, hey, why when I go to Lifeway or Barnes and Noble and I go to the Bible section, there's so many different translations. Part of the answer is because there's a history of translation. Part of the answer is because even among modern translations, there are different purposes to each one. So you can usually actually find a statement from the translation committee in the first few pages, there where all the copyright material and information is.
Is that what that is?
So go ahead and take a look at that. That's where I found out that's what the mission of the NRSV is,
Okay.
Awesome.
And what the ESV's mission is. There is no singular answer if someone was like, well, what's the best one?
Right.
Depends on who you are. Depends on what you're doing.
Can I admit something right now?
What?
The Bible that I own and use right now,
Yeah.
not the one on my phone, but the actual paperback Bible,
Hmm.
I chose it because of how it looks. On the outside, it had like this leather look, and like
Beautiful.
all the other ones that were like different versions and stuff, they were
Yeah.
all like
No, I mean,
glossy
Corey,
paper. I didn't like it.
I think Corey did specifically look for an ESV, but the Bible she has that she loves and has made her own, she picked it because it had a nice yellow little floral design.
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
front,
Cute.
and that's her favorite color.
Is it NIV?
No, it's ESV. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
I ended up with
yeah.
NIV.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a fine
This
translation.
one's got leather on it. That's cool.
It's
Kind of
leather and
manly.
black, right? Yeah.
If they had a black Bible.
Oh, it wasn't black.
No,
Oh.
Amanda's is.
Okay.
Man, I'm jealous. She got one from her
I'm actually
school.
waiting.
go.
I ordered a new ESV Bible that's on its way.
You know what? If I went online, I bet I could find an awesome Bible. You all should do that, by the way.
And it's
There you go.
Go find the most awesome
It's got
Bible.
it's like the only stupid luxury purchase I've made in a while. It's
Well, it's
got
not
a
stupid.
I
buffalo.
don't know if I believe that.
Right.
It's got a
First of all,
look, dude. I shop at the Gap outlet. Okay, but it's got a buffalo leather case.
Buffalo.
Wow.
Yeah.
cool.
What color is it? Just brown?
Dark brown. And
cool.
it's gonna have my name on the front. It's gonna say Pastor
personally-
Charles D. Wolf.
What?
So yeah, so I'm
Like,
waiting on that. I actually wouldn't have gotten it, but so here's all right. Interesting tidbit. We'll close
right.
the show on this.
Right.
Close it up.
So
Do.
I make the slides for our sermons in the ESV.
Yeah.
I
noticed.
read in person from the NRSV. That's my C.S. Lewis Bible.
Yeah, I've noticed.
I started doing that to make people curious about different translations. At least that was my intention.
It's intentional.
That was my hope.
Ah.
I thought it was kind of by accident.
No, my hope was that people would see and hear the difference, and they'd go,
I've just been sitting there like, man, what a dummy.
and they'd go, oh, yeah, there are different translations. Hey, let me go ask him why this verse might read in a different order in this version as
So,
opposed to this
has that
version.
worked?
Well,
Yeah.
no. Instead, what I've gotten are two
Confused
confrontations
looks.
with members who have come up and
Going
said, it's very confusing.
Yes.
That
Thank you.
the words
Yeah.
you read are not the words on the screen.
That is
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
That is
So,
a fair
I'm trying to
statement.
follow along, and
Yeah.
then you say this
So-
word, and I see that word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're Southern all of a sudden.
Well-
So I said, all right, forget it.
At least one of them is.
I'll order an ESV Bible for myself so I don't steal Corey's every Sunday. And I'll read from that from now on.
Okay.
So-
all right.
Very
Or
good.
you could have just done the slides in the version that you have.
I
have been reading.
Yes, yeah.
If you're going to read it anyway, you're halfway there.
Yeah. It's the second Bible
But
I
you have
bought
another
this
one.
year, actually.
Wow.
Because I also bought one called the Complete Jewish Bible that their translation board is a majority Messianic Jews
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
who are like Hebrew
well,
scholars.
I would hope that they're
Yeah.
Messianic Jews.
Yeah, as opposed to non.
And they're
Just
Hebrew
regular Jews.
They're
Yeah.
Hebrew scholars.
Everything at this point is crap.
And the intention was to
Yeah.
preserve the original
No offense.
Jewish names of different characters, events, and things. So
Ah.
they do not use the name Jesus.
Yeshua?
He's referred to as Yeshua
Sure.
Okay.
or Yeshua of Nazareth or
Sure.
Yeshua the Messiah throughout the whole New Testament part
Well,
of
that's
the
kind of
text.
cool.
The Feast of Tabernacles is referred to by its original Jewish name. The Festival of Lights, Hanukkah, is referred to by its original Jewish name. So they preserved,
Which is Hanukkah.
yeah.
How do you know?
So I think Peter is referred to as
Cephas.
Kepha throughout the text.
Okay. I pronounced it wrong.
Well, that's okay. You knew it.
I knew how it's spelled.
Yeah. So, it's stuff like that. And I thought that was kind of neat. It's especially neat to read the Old Testament version
Very good.
of that. Yeah.
Well, wrapping up episode 10. This has been Run Amok with Rex and Chuck. Please follow us, like us, leave us a review. RARCpodcast.com. Thank you much.
So that was like a tight 20, probably, right? No?